Troy came and he didn't know the tyres or the bike. He was extremely fast from free practice onwards. Then, during the race, we fought, and he won. But I have to say that I was very happy with his victory, because he needed it. He'd never won a MotoGP race, and so I felt like I'd won instead. When a rider doesn't know either the bike or the tyres, talent takes over. Troy had a lot of talent. If he found himself in the right place at the right time, he could probably even win on a tricycle. He had this incredible enthusiasm and a talent definitely above average.
The best stories always start from the end, and the one between Troy Bayliss and MotoGP ends in the best possible way. Not only with an extraordinary victory, but with a truly exemplary one, as so often happened in the life of this rider, who came from a land down under. We are at Valencia. It's 2006, and Troy has already had an opportunity to experience the glory and the dust, success and defeat, racing in MotoGP and returning to Superbike. Like a boxer who only becomes great when he first hits the mat, Troy finally ascended to racing greatness. But first, we must go back and talk about Troy Bayliss's adventure in the MotoGP World Championship. It was the result of a challenge, which as such brings with it many reasons and feelings. Ambition and arrogance, willpower and confidence in one's own means. There is all this and more in Ducati's debut in the premier class of the World Championship, MotoGP, created just 1 year before to replace the glorious 500cc two-strokes. Now the engines are four-stroke and with a displacement limit of 1 litre. But for Ducati it is a challenge, not a gamble, as Claudio Domenicali, current CEO of Ducati and at the time head of Ducati Course, remembers. For its debut in 2003, Ducati chose the three-time world champion in the 125 and 250cc classes, Loris Capirossi, alongside its superbike icon, Troy Bayliss.
Even though we were perfectly aware of our limited means and resources, we were testing the bike and we saw that it had a lot of strong points, but we knew we had a lot more to learn. And I also have to say that things worked really well, and the results that we achieved with the bike were very good.
Claudio Domenicali had a real passion for Bayliss.
For me in the races, Bayliss was the epitome of courage. He was a very courageous rider, and he was always a very caring person, but at the same time, he always had strong family ties. So maybe the best part of his character is this double-sided nature. A very strong rider, but also extremely caring, and then, when the race was over, he always went back to his family.
He was a rider capable of melting people's hearts.
I think that people fall in love with the generosity of the riders and the fact that they can identify themselves with them. There are definitely some riders who are much loved and admired, but others who are admired but not loved so much. And I think Troy was one of the former. He started right from the bottom. He used to spray paint cars. He began racing late, so it really is truly a story in which a lot of people can see themselves in.
And also entering the heart of his teammate, Loris Capirossi.
I must admit that I've got great memories of Troy because we raced together. Let's say we began the first tests with Ducati at the end of 2002 and we did the 2003 and 2004 seasons together in MotoGP. I must say first of all, he's a great person. We got on really well with each other in those 2 years. He came from Superbike, which is a completely different environment from ours. But from that moment on we became friends, and we're still great friends today. He is definitely an ex-rider at the moment, but he had so much talent, and above all, he was very courageous. What I said before, Troy was and is such a courageous rider. In particular, he was afraid of nothing. He was one of those riders that considered that a challenge was not just a challenge, but was something that needed to be completed, and he put so much heart and courage into it. And that's why our friendship came about, and why it's still there today after so many years. We're often in touch with each other, we speak to each other a lot, and more recently after this latest crash that he had on a bicycle. I have to admit that Troy really is a legend, a person with a great heart and a great champion. The first season we did together, 2003, was a great season for the pair of us. The bike was new and hard to ride. It was like a warhorse. Troy and I tried our best, and it was at the end of the races that we were always exhausted because the bike burned us out. It was unbearably hot, but it was such a great season. We always respected each other and tried to work together.
2003 wasn't in the plan because the plan was for 2002, but Ducati had decided to build a GP bike, and when I was offered that job, how can you turn that down? I mean, I had a good job with Ducati and loved working with the guys, and it felt like it was something that I should do.
In 2003, Troy was elected Rookie of the Year thanks to 3 splendid third places in Spain, Germany and the Czech Republic. Capirossi in Catalonia managed to do better. He gave Ducati its first success in the premier class of motorcycle racing. And after a year of learning the ropes, expectations were high for 2004, but things didn't go the way everyone had hoped for.
2004 was, we actually thought we were going to have a great year and thought we'd come up with a bike that was capable of winning the championship. It wasn't the case in the end. So yeah, it was a struggle. We both hardly made any decent podiums that year. I think Loris might have made 3 and I made 1 or 2, I can't remember. But yeah, 2004 was a big struggle for us and Ducati, and yeah, it was a bit of a tough time.
Troy's best result was a 3rd place in the final race at Valencia, and Loris went no better that year. 3rd only once in Australia. As a result, Troy's marriage with Ducati came to a sad end. In 2005, Bayliss switched to Honda to race in MotoGP, but his friendship with Capirossi remained.
Troy and I shared a lot of things, especially during those years when we were together at Ducati. He lived in Monte Carlo too, so we hung out together sometimes, and I've got some beautiful memories. It was the first time he'd ridden a trials bike, for example, but every obstacle, even a 2-metre high rock, he always tried to get over it. He wasn't afraid of anything. He even came with the track boots, not those specific for trials or motocross. For him it was okay like that. He never held back. I really do have some very good memories today. Sometimes we do still get in touch and sometimes we hang out. But he's always competitive. I follow him. He always does a lot of races. He's great. When we're 60 or 70, he'll still be on a bike or in a car or on a go-kart to step on the gas. I've no doubt about it.
2005 was a red line on the calendar. A bad year. There was no feeling with the Honda. The results failed to come, and a wrist injury during a motocross training session brought an early end to his season. His last race of the year was in the Czech Republic, where he finished 9th. A result that did not correspond in any way to his talent and to his stature as a world champion. It simply wasn't possible for his MotoGP adventure to finish like this. And in fact, the following year, Troy produced what can truly be called his masterpiece. The Grand Prix of the Valencian community, the final round of the 2006 World Championship, 29th of October. For the 3rd time in his career, Troy is called in to replace an injured rider. This time it was Sete Gibernau of Ducati's factory MotoGP team. He was in a state of grace, having just clinched his 2nd World Superbike title. He hadn't ridden a MotoGP bike for over a year, however. He didn't know the Bridgestone tyres, yet he took on the challenge, as he always has. Let's hear from Paolo Ciabatti.
My first memory of Troy Bayliss, who I've known for many years, came when we first met in Daytona for the 200-mile race. And since then, we've had a lot of great moments together. Maybe the most amazing one was the 2006 Valencia MotoGP race. Troy was World Superbike champion with us in 2001, and then he won the 2006 championship after doing 2 seasons with Ducati in MotoGP, and then 2005 with the Pons team, which he didn't finish due to an accident. So at that point there were not very many people who believed in a possible return of Troy to Superbike, but we were convinced. He was still the champion rider that he'd been before. In fact, he came back and won the championship, winning 12 races. In fact, he dominated it. At the end of the season, with Troy as Superbike world champion, an opportunity came for him to race the final Grand Prix of the MotoGP season, which was also the last GP of the first part of history of the 1000cc engines, because in 2007 MotoGP would switch to the 800cc engines. Because Sete Gibernau had an accident, so he wasn't able to do the race, so we called Troy. Troy wasn't convinced about doing it at all, because he'd just won the Superbike World Championship and had planned to go to Paris with Kim to celebrate, as married couples in love often do. But faced with this opportunity, he said he would go on one condition: that he could take the 3 people who had always followed him in Superbike with him. That is Ernesto Marinelli, technical director, Davide Terozzi, team manager, and myself, who at the time was the sporting director. So, after overcoming the obstacle of taking 3 Superbike people into the world of MotoGP, we started in Valencia with the desire to do well, but without really knowing what we could do. Because let's not forget that Troy hadn't been on a Ducati MotoGP machine since 2004. He'd had no opportunity to even test the bike. He didn't know the Bridgestone tyres, and therefore there were a lot of unknown factors. But let's say that things started to go well immediately. If I remember well, Friday wasn't a bad day, and at the end of the 2 practice sessions, I think Troy was 6th. On Saturday, he qualified 2nd, and he was a bit disappointed because he made an error at the last corner and he felt that pole position could have been his. At that point, though, the MotoGP paddock began to sit up and take notice of this rider, who had been in MotoGP for a few years scoring good results, but was never really considered to be one of the riders who could even win a Grand Prix. And here he is, turning up at the last race of the season, qualifying on the front row of the grid, and basically there were just a few surprised faces everywhere. The rest is history, in the sense that Troy started in the lead and led from the first to the last lap. And it was an important 1-2 victory for Ducati because Loris Capirossi was in 2nd place, and that meant he finished 3rd in the World Championship standings. And many people will actually also remember that race because Valentino crashed and then the title also went to Nicky Hayden. But for us, that race truly consecrated Troy as one of the all-time greats. Because I believe that in history, it will remain a unique event. A Superbike World Champion rider in the same year who does a single MotoGP race and wins it. I believe that it's something that will remain in the memory of many Ducati enthusiasts and in the history of motorcycling, and for sure, it has and always will have a special place in my heart.
Troy brought his team with him to Valencia. And of course there was also his track engineer, Ernesto Marinelli.
For me, one of the most epic feats ever in racing, something that will remain in my heart forever, was the Moto Grand Prix race in Valencia. The whole thing virtually came about a week and a half before the event. We found we had to organise everything with a different bike, different tyres, just after winning the Superbike World Championship. So it was a sort of adventure that came about as, okay, let's go, let's see how we go, but instead we came out as the winners at the end of the weekend. It was something that now I still believe is the most amazing race of my life, and it was all thanks to Troy, because it was a truly extraordinary thing that he did. It was also a very busy weekend in the sense that obviously we started by saying what we're going to do. Shall we do one bike with the MotoGP setup and make the other one as similar as possible to the bike he was more used to? Let's see how things go and we'll go in that direction. So we sort of built the entire weekend in that way. On Sunday he started in the lead, he finished in the lead. It was crazy to end a fantastic year as the world champion. And after winning the 2006 title, the memory of that will stay with me for my whole career. He used the bike that was closer to his Superbike setting because it was obviously the right way to go with the rider setup. He had a lot of feeling, and so even though it was a very different motorcycle and so on, he had a bike that he could ride the way that he liked, even though there were differences. With that, we managed to provide him with a bike that gave him the confidence to go out and bring us the result that he did. I remember at the end of the race he continued to say that the Bridgestone tyres were impressive, because I don't think he realised exactly what he'd just done.
So it was Troy first, Capirossi second. But Loris, who had already achieved 3 victories with the red bike from Borgo Panigale that year, was not disappointed.
That was a great race. Maybe it was the only time in my life that I was happy that another rider had beaten me, and I was really happy for him, because Troy had never won a Grand Prix race at all. That was his only race, and he went so well. He became Superbike World Champion, then he went to MotoGP, then he went back to Superbike where he won another title. And he went and did that wild card and won the race, so I was very happy. And he was really strong in that race.
You couldn't fail to love him, Troy, even if you were one of his rivals on the track, because
he wasn't normal, he was crazy.
And so Troy Bayliss's adventure in MotoGP came to an end, with a victory that was by no means a gift of fate, even though it seemed so. His path, however, had already been traced, because at the start of 2006 he had returned to his home in the Superbike World Championship and had once again become the master. Text by Luca Delicari, narrated by Julian Thomas and Michael Hill, with the voices of Troy Bayliss, Loris Capirossi, Paolo Ciabatti, Claudio Domenicali and Ernesto Marinelli. For the quotes, courtesy A Man, a Rider, a Legend, Sport Review production.